Ghost with Cats, Chapter 18, Memories Obscured. "What?" Annie exclaimed, leaning away from Tall when he declared they had known each other since they were children. They had grown up on different planets, but Tall seemed so sure. "I remember we were playing in the meadow outside that is covered in snow now. A giant black and white cat was following you around. Your father had red hair and wore a blue uniform, and your mother's laugh sounded like music. She baked cookies every day. All the memories I thought were my grandmother were her. True brought me here for a year or more. I remember we swam in the hot springs. He pointed out the seven-pointed star on the ceiling. When I saw it yesterday, I remembered. I remembered what I was not supposed to and went into a shalom. My own brother clouded my memories on purpose." He sounded hurt and confused. "Why would he do that?" she asked, just as confused. She dreamed almost the exact same thing when they were on the bus to Vegas. It couldn't be true, but somehow she knew it was. "I think he meant for me to have a mother figure, Annalise. Think hard. What do you remember?" he demanded. His arms held her captive, but it was more like he was the prisoner, not her. "Tall, my parents were children's sponsors. We hosted orphan boys from Israel every summer at the beach house, or Mom and I came here, or we took them to the cabin. I only remember that I wasn't supposed to talk to them about them at school because Mom was helping them get past their trauma. It was the whole doctor-patient confidentiality thing. She wasn't just a physicist, she was a psychologist too. Eventually, they all just kind of ran together. Twice we went to Israel. The second time was awful. The next fall, I went to the university. I was 14, and I didn't see them much after that, but she still did it until she was murdered," Annie answered, struggling to process it all. "Are you saying all them boys were from y'all's people?" "I think yes," he responded, releasing her reluctantly. "I am sure I was not the only one. There were my brothers, my cousins, and possibly the sons of my father's allies." "Did you figure this out when you were, whatever that was?" she whispered. He could tell from her tone she was truly frightened and worried. "Yes and no. I think I started to realize it when I saw your nativity, but my mind could not accept it. True had a Christmas card with the image of a nativity in his possession when he died. But it was not the first time he visited here. Rabbi Jacob confirmed this," he answered. "But why? Why bring them here?" she wondered tremulously. "How can you be sure?" "Because we do not treat those of lower tier as property to be used and discarded in the way many of our tier do. We treat them as having value, the way they were treated in the past. Masters are to treat those below them well because there is one above all who will some day judge each of us," he quoted. "That teaching has been forgotten. True was trying to change things back to the way they were. To know how to show affection, one must have been shown affection. Your mother, and perhaps others, showed love to at least a few of the sons of my people, a great kindness which ended with my brother's death. with your mother's death. He sounded grieved as he said the words. Love is the lost light. I believe true meant for you to bring it back to my people. Annie was trembling as she stood up quickly, backing away from the bed. She panted in near panic as she stammered, No, no, y'all have to be wrong. I can't. I need a cup of coffee. She fled from the room like she was afraid he would hurt her or drag her off to his world by force. Annie was shaking uncontrollably as she went down to the kitchen, almost sloshing coffee as she tried to pour a mug. Tall had to be crazy. Brain damage from being under the water too long or something. Justifying her thoughts, she decided she couldn't possibly go to another world and speak to how many thousands of females about love. What would she say to them, she wondered. Time to stop being mean girls and start loving each other and your males and children. She could hardly talk to a room of 36 writing students. She usually focused on a single student at a time to keep from having a panic attack. There's no way. Tall has to be wrong. Arguing with her logic that suggested what if, she took her coffee cup to a small alcove beyond the spiral staircase in the library and hid. The one rule for being a ghost: be as invisible as possible. She needed to think, but she wanted to go home, lock herself in her house so he couldn't take her back to Eloh. Declaring herself a coward, her fear and will warred. It isn't safe here. It isn't safe with him, no matter how it feels. But all those people live in such a wretched existence. Mom would go without hesitation. Oh God, why do I care so much? From falling for the evil prince most available to the noble admiral least available, she decided she was so pathetic. Outside, she watched the snow swirling against the glass while she talked herself down from her lunacy. In a few days, he would be forever gone, and she would never see or speak to him again, she reminded herself firmly. In a few days, she could go back to being a ghost. Tall reached out with his mind as he dried and dressed. His fingers lingered over the scar on his chest, where he was almost killed during the last lottery. He shook the thought away and reached out again. Breeze was in the kitchen, feeling distressed. Annie was sitting in the hidden window seat, staring out at the blizzard. The storm inside her as tumultuous as the one beyond the glass. Downstairs in the office, Tall's mind found Boaz and Vorn. His cipher was working with Boaz on the communication uplink. They were talking to Isaac and Jacob's people about the satellite they needed to talk to the incoming ships. This afternoon, they would be able to send and receive a signal from his incoming ships. Stalking silently downstairs, Tall summoned his cipher. Vorn entered the great room with Boaz behind him. Master, we should have the ability to speak with our people in 4 to 6 hours. But there is unusually high solar activity, which may delay their arrival by several days. Boaz nodded. It might work to your advantage. New Year's Eve is always a big party night with lots of pyrotechnics. It will make getting your ships in and out unnoticed a lot easier. Tall revealed, we still have a problem. We were lured here and shot down by 3 fighters of our own tech before we were captured. Technology your people do not possess. So we have enemies allied with some of your people. Boaz frowned. I was not made aware of that. The solar activity will be to our advantage. It will disguise our ships as they approach and leave, as long as the moon is our shield while in orbit. We should be able to remain adequately hidden. Vorn, make the calculations. Will the weather allow us to be picked up on the peak near the original coordinates? Tal asked. The weather will be clear those days. There may be wind, but no storms. Visibility for the approach should also be clear, but heavy solar activity will have the electromagnetic fields active around the planet, Vorn answered. Very well. We will plan to be picked up at the original coordinates, unless we are forced to flee from here. Then I will have to summon them to us once they breach the atmosphere, Tal said. Or we can give them the beach house, Annie added from behind them. They had not heard her enter. We don't have to worry about winds or visibility or setting off Space Command's warning system, because the approach will be off the Gulf of Mexico from international waters. Won't they be watching it? Boaz worried. Only the one on Galveston. The one in Matagorda has been under a holding company since Mom and Dad died. There is no traceable connection to me. I actually have 4 others there now, too. They get rented every week during the summer or the snowbirds during the winter. But there is no one there this winter. The economy, she explained and shrugged. Boaz nodded, but the Eloh just looked as if they did not understand. She smiled tightly as she explained, we can leave in a few days and take advantage of the heavy holiday traffic. Many people travel at this time of year, and we will be just another family going home. Tal thought about her plan. Their enemies may have the coordinates for the rendezvous since they have their tech. Perhaps further deception was called for. He considered it. How far is Galveston from Matagorda? Less than 100 miles, she answered. He frowned. Not far enough. An Eloh slipper could travel that distance in a fraction of a micromark. His mind started running the tactical. He or Vorn could summon his crew to them without tipping the enemy that they were changing coordinates. But it put his pilots at risk because they must fly through the atmosphere longer. You don't want to send the new coordinates yet, 'cause you think Vince or someone else may be listening, Annie observed. Tal nodded. Who's Vince? Boaz asked. The human who is hunting us and Annalise, Tal answered. Vince is a government contractor and private research financier. He bought Pandora when it was declassified. He wants me to make it work, and he wants Tal for the Elohs tech. He has the government, law enforcement, and his private army looking for us, Annie explained. Boaz just nodded thoughtfully. So it's a shell game. They stood quietly for a moment as Boaz lit a cigarette. We'll need to get there on the last possible day, just to be safe, but plan for a day before, just in case we get delayed. We can take the scenic route, blend in with the holiday tourist, Annie responded. They began talking about places the Eloh knew nothing of. Vorn glanced to Tal, who simply nodded before he left the room. Are you healing Pet Breeze? Tal asked as he entered the kitchen. Yes, master. Pet Breeze heals, he answered sullenly, not looking up. Tal heated the plate of breakfast foods, Bourne prepared for him. As he ate in silence, he could sense that his sword pet wished to speak. Tall rose and washed his plate and cutlery. "You may speak," Tall said at last. Bree shifted nervously for a moment, then asked in an oddly childlike voice, "Breeze wonders why Master and Lady Annie are upset with each other when they should have affection. Are they not meant for each other?" A cup shattered behind him. Annie was standing there in the doorway with her mouth open. Tall also had no response. It was not a pair of questions he ever expected, and certainly not from this source. For a moment, no one moved. Then Annie bent to pick up the pieces of the cup. She was muttering words his translator did not know. The broken ceramic went into the trash, and she wiped the floor with a towel. Finally, Annie walked over to Breeze, pushed him onto a stool. She put her hands on either side of his face and pulled his head down, rubbing her sleeve on the top. "There, nice and shiny." She tipped it back up and looked in his dark eyes. "Listen carefully, Breeze. Sometimes friendships become difficult. Things come up, and it takes time for it to become easy again. The Master and I have a lot to think about. We have learned many strange things since coming here. Don't worry your shiny head about it, okay?" Breeze nodded. Breeze does not understand, but will not worry if Lady Annie says not to. She patted his cheek affectionately. He was childlike, and she wondered how old he was. She would have to ask Bourne. Annie grabbed another cup of coffee and left the kitchen, not speaking to Tall. She needed time to process it all. He realized he needed time too, time they did not have. His sword pet was still watching him. "Do not worry, Breeze. It is a difficult thing I discovered, but we do not withhold the truth from each other. No matter how difficult," Tall said to his guard. "To deceive is to dishonor," Breeze repeated, one of Tall's father's most frequent sayings. Tall thought of how much of his father's teachings he passed on to his servants, subordinates, and pets, since he did not have sons. It was the first time the thought saddened him. They received a signal confirming in 8.5 days instead of the 6 they were hoping for. The Eloh would arrive. They sent a repeat of the first message, including using the moon as their shield for the orbital station point. Tall and Bourne joined their minds to send the message to Tall's new second cipher, Malin Janif, so Tall would know the signal had been received. The 3 ships were to travel silently and alert because the Advent believed the communications were being monitored, and to be prepared for any challenge. The new arrival was on the day after the New Year, in a different location. The retrieval coordinates to be sent directly from the Advent.